Leave that glass alone. Don't touch it, Black.
I'm sorry, I just wanted...
Wanted to do what? Pretending you belong here?
Jesus Christ.
Black monkey. I can smell the stench of a zoo on you.
Please, I have a first-class ticket. Seat 3A.
The flight attendant didn't even look at the boarding pass. She looked at the sneakers, the tattered bag.
You look like you wandered out of an animal den. This champagne isn't for someone like you.
Shut up and hope I don't call the captain to drag you back to the zoo.
The black woman in seat 3A, she didn't argue, she didn't raise her voice. But what she did next was something no one saw coming.
4:45 in the morning, Atlanta. The city was still asleep, but Denise Grant was already lacing up her running shoes. Same pair she'd worn for 3 years. Same routine since she was 26. 5 miles along the Beltline before the sun came up. No music, no podcast. Just her breath and the sound of her feet hitting concrete. Her apartment sat on the 32nd floor of a high-rise in Buckhead. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A kitchen that could feed 12. Most mornings, she didn't even turn on the lights. She liked the dark. It was the only time of day the world left her alone. On her nightstand, 2 photographs. The first, her son, Elijah Grant, 19 years old, sophomore at MIT, engineering major. Smiled just like his father, who had passed when Elijah was 4. The second photograph was older, faded at the edges. A black woman in her 50s, standing in front of a food truck in Macon, Georgia. Hand-painted sign on the side. Ruth's Kitchen. Soul food done right. That was Ruth Grant, Denise's mother, the woman who started everything. Denise kissed 2 fingers and pressed them against the glass of Ruth's photo. She did this every single morning, 14 years without missing once. By 6:15, she was showered, dressed, and reading emails in the back seat of a black sedan heading to Hartsfield-Jackson. Her outfit for the day? Dark jeans, an old MIT sweatshirt, Elijah's, not hers. A navy blazer thrown over the top, white sneakers, and a leather tote bag so worn the stitching was coming loose at the corners. No earrings, no watch, no makeup. This was deliberate. Denise Grant was the founder and CEO of Meridian Hospitality Group, a company she had built from her mother's single food truck into an $880 million operation with 2,300 employees across 4 states. Meridian handled catering, in-flight food service, ground logistics, and vendor management for 4 of the largest airlines in the United States. One of those airlines was North Star Atlantic Airways. The contract between Meridian and North Star was worth $44 million a year. The renewal ceremony was scheduled for tomorrow morning in Seattle. And today, Denise was flying commercial. Not because she had to. Meridian had a Gulfstream sitting in a private hangar 12 minutes from her apartment. Her COO, Daniel Anderson, had begged her to take it. He begged her every quarter. Every quarter, she said no. Daniel, you can't audit a company from a leather recliner at 50,000 feet. This was her ritual. Every 3 months, Denise booked a first-class ticket on one of the airlines Meridian served. She dressed down. She carried no business cards. She wore nothing that said money. And then she watched. How did the crew treat passengers? Which passengers got smiled at? Which ones got looked through? She already knew the answer. She had known it her whole life. At the gate, a young agent scanned her boarding pass, paused, looked at the screen, looked at Denise, looked at the screen again. "Ma'am, this is for first class." Denise smiled. "I know." The agent hesitated, then waved her through. Denise didn't look back. She had been waved through with that same hesitation 1,000 times. Seat 3A, window. She settled in, pulled out her tablet, and opened the North Star Atlantic Q4 contract review document. $44 million of logistics, catering schedules, and vendor compliance reports glowing on a 10-inch screen. Across the aisle in 3D, a white businessman in a Patagonia vest glanced at her, then slowly pulled his briefcase to the far side of his seat. In 3C, an older white woman leaned over and asked very sweetly, "Are you sure you're in the right seat, dear?" Denise nodded. "Yes, ma'am, thank you." The woman asked again 2 minutes later. In seat 2C, a woman with silver gray hair and a simple charcoal blazer settled in quietly. On her lap, a leather-bound notepad and a Pilot G2 pin. She nodded politely at Denise. Denise nodded back. Neither of them knew the other's name yet. By the end of this flight, the whole country would. Then the beverage cart appeared at the front of the cabin, and behind it, with a perfect French braid and a smile sharp enough to cut glass, came a flight attendant named Vanessa Brooks. Vanessa Brooks had worked first class for 12 years. She knew every frequent flyer by name. She knew who wanted still water, who wanted sparkling, who needed their pillow fluffed before the seatbelt sign turned off. She was good at her job. She was proud of it. And she had a very specific idea of who belonged in her cabin. The cart rolled forward. Row 1. Champagne, sir. A crystal flute tilted at the perfect angle. Golden bubbles catching the overhead light. The man in 1A smiled. Vanessa smiled wider. Champagne, ma'am? Row 1C. A woman in a cream cashmere sweater. Vanessa poured with both hands, like she was serving royalty. Mr. Caldwell, your usual sparkling water with lime. Row 2A. She remembered. She always remembered. Row 2C. The silver-haired woman with the notepad. Vanessa poured without conversation. Polite, quick, efficient. The woman thanked her quietly and went back to writing. Then the cart reached row 3. Vanessa turned to 3D first, the Patagonia vest. Champagne, sir? Wonderful choice. She poured. She laughed at something he said. She touched his armrest like they were old friends. Then she turned back to the cart, adjusted a napkin, straightened a bottle, and began to push past 3A. Denise watched all of it. She had watched women like Vanessa her entire life. The way their eyes skipped over you. The way their hands moved around you like you were furniture. She knew exactly what was happening. She had been measuring it since the moment she sat down. Excuse me. Vanessa stopped, turned. The smile dropped half a degree. Could I have a glass of champagne, please? Vanessa's eyes moved down. Sneakers. Jeans. The tattered tote bag. The MIT sweatshirt with a small coffee stain near the collar. Her gaze climbed back up slowly, like she was appraising something at a yard sale. Are you in the right seat? Denise held up her boarding pass. 3A, first class. Denise A. Grant, printed in clear black letters. Vanessa's jaw tightened. The smile came back, but different now. Thinner. Colder. Let me check on something. She walked away with the boarding pass still in Denise's hand. She didn't pour. She didn't come back. 11 minutes passed. Denise counted every one of them. She watched the second hand on the cabin clock above the galley curtain tick its way around. Twice. 3 times. She watched Vanessa pour champagne for the woman in 4B, watched her hand a warm towel to the man in 4D and ask about his golf trip to Scottsdale, watched her refill 1A's glass without being asked. Every pour, every smile, every small kindness, delivered to every seat around her like she was standing inside a circle that only she couldn't cross. Minute 6. Vanessa walked right past 3A carrying a tray of warm nuts. Her sleeve brushed Denise's armrest. She didn't look down. Didn't slow. Like 3A was an empty seat. Like no one was sitting in it at all. Minute 9. Denise set her tablet down. She folded her hands and stared straight ahead at the seat back in front of her. She could feel the other passengers not looking at her. That particular silence that happens when everyone in a room sees what's happening and decides, one by one, that it's not their problem. Minute 11. Vanessa came back. She was carrying a plastic cup. Not a glass, not crystal. A plastic cup. The kind they give to children on domestic economy flights. Inside it, tap water. No ice, no lime, no napkin underneath. She set it on Denise's tray with a small, satisfied click. Here you go, sweetheart. I think this is more your speed. A low chuckle from 3D. The Patagonia man didn't look up from his Wall Street Journal, but his shoulders shook. The older woman in 3C glanced over, then looked away quickly, like she had seen something she didn't want to be part of. Denise looked at the plastic cup, looked at the crystal flutes glittering in every other seat, looked back at Vanessa. "I'd like a glass of champagne, please, same as everyone else in this cabin." Something shifted in Vanessa's face. The performance mask slipped. What was underneath was not polite. It was not professional. It was something old, something inherited, something she had probably never had to name out loud because no one had ever made her. She straightened up to her full height. Her voice rose, not just loud enough for Denise to hear, loud enough for the entire cabin. "Ma'am, are you deaf? I said this champagne is for first-class passengers, not whatever charity case wandered up here by accident." The cabin went silent. The hum of the engine suddenly sounded very loud. "Look at you. Sweatshirt, sneakers. You look like you couldn't even afford the taxi to the airport. I'm not wasting a $60 bottle on someone who clearly doesn't belong here." Denise breathed in. One long, slow breath. She counted to 4. She thought about her mother, Ruth, standing behind that food truck in 98-degree Georgia heat, handing plates to people who called her girl and never learned her name. She thought about what Ruth always said when Denise came home from school with tears in her eyes and fists at her sides. "Baby, anger is a luxury that costs black women everything." Denise exhaled. "I understand. I'd still like a glass, if that's okay." Vanessa's head tilted, like a dog hearing a frequency it didn't recognize. This black woman was still talking, still polite, still sitting there. People were supposed to shrink. They were supposed to leave. This one didn't. "Oh my God, you're still talking?" Vanessa stepped closer, close enough that Denise could smell her perfume, something floral and sharp, close enough that when she spoke, small flecks of spit landed on Denise's tray table. "Let me make this really simple for you, sweetheart. People like you don't drink champagne. Now sit down, shut up, and I'll bring you another water, if you're lucky." She spun on her heel and walked back toward the galley. Her shoes clicked on the cabin floor like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence she thought she had won. In the galley, she didn't lower her voice. She didn't even try. "Honestly, Maggie, they let anybody buy a ticket these days." Senior purser Margaret Wilson stood at the galley counter with a coffee pot frozen in her hand. 28 years with North Star Atlantic. She had never heard a crew member speak like this on a live aircraft. "Vanessa, stop, right now." "Oh, come on, Maggie. You and I both know how she got that seat. Mileage glitch. Some DEI upgrade. I've seen it 100 times. I don't care how she got her seat. She's a paying passenger, and you just humiliated her in front of..." "Humiliated? Please. I'm protecting this cabin. You think the man in 3D wants to sit next to that? You think Mrs. Caldwell paid $8,000 to share champagne with someone who looks like she cleans hotel rooms for a living?" Maggie set the coffee pot down. Her hand was shaking. "Vanessa, I'm telling you as your senior purser. One more word about that passenger, and I'm writing you up." Vanessa leaned against the galley counter and crossed her arms. Her smile didn't waver. "Write me up, Maggie. Go ahead. You think anyone's going to take her side over mine? Look at her. Look at me. We both know how this ends." Maggie's knuckles went white. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again. No words came. Because somewhere, buried under 28 years of company loyalty, she knew Vanessa wasn't entirely wrong about how the system worked. And that was the worst part. Back in 3A, Denise closed her tablet. She turned toward the window. The sun was coming up over the clouds, painting everything gold and pink. It was beautiful. She didn't see any of it. Her jaw was set. Her breathing was even. Her hands were still. But behind her eyes, something had just shifted into place, like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting a very long time. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Captain Howard Bennett's voice filled the cabin, calm and routine. "Good morning, folks. We're cruising at 36,000 feet. Smooth air ahead. Estimated arrival in Seattle in 4 hours and 38 minutes. Sit back, relax, and let us take care of you. Let us take care of you. Denise almost smiled. Vanessa moved through the safety demonstration with practiced ease, but every few seconds, her eyes drifted back to 3A. Not checking. Gloating. A small, satisfied glance, like a cat watching something it had already caught. Maggie Wilson waited until Vanessa disappeared into the forward galley. Then she walked to 3A. Quietly. Carefully. The way you approach someone who's been hit and is trying not to show it. Ma'am, I am so sorry for what happened. That was completely unacceptable. May I bring you a glass of champagne? Denise looked up. Maggie's face was flushed. Her eyes were wet at the edges. This woman was genuinely ashamed. Not for herself, for her airline, for her uniform, for the fact that she had stood in that galley and heard every word and hadn't been able to stop it. No, thank you. I'd just like to be left alone now. Maggie hesitated. She wanted to say more. She wanted to say she was sorry again, louder, in a way that would undo the last 20 minutes. But she couldn't, so she nodded and walked away. She didn't go back to the forward galley. She went to the rear galley instead. She closed the curtain behind her, and for the first time in 28 years of flying, Margaret Wilson reached up and pressed the button marked Galley Voice Recorder, Incident Mode. Her hand was trembling. She pulled a form from the overhead drawer. Crew Incident Log, Form 14B. She had seen it 100 times in training. She had never once filled one out. She uncapped her pen and began to write. Up front, Vanessa saw Maggie talking to 3A. She was out of her seat before Maggie even turned around. Maggie, I've got 3A. Don't worry about her. Then she turned to Denise. Leaned down. Voice low. Intimate. The kind of quiet that's worse than shouting, because it's designed for only one person to hear. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your ID and boarding pass again. We've had reports of seat jumping on this flight. There had been no reports. Denise reached into her bag, pulled out both documents, and handed them over without a word. Vanessa took them. She didn't glance at them. She walked them all the way to the back of the plane. 10 minutes later, she returned and dropped them on Denise's tray, like she was returning something she'd found on the floor. They look real. Strange. She didn't wait for a response. She just turned and walked away, her heels tapping the floor. Slow. Deliberate. The walk of someone who wanted you to hear her leaving. 15 minutes later, she was back. This time, she brought nothing. No cart, no cup, no pretense of service. She just appeared at the edge of 3A like a shadow falling across a doorstep, leaned down until her mouth was inches from Denise's ear. Her breath smelled like peppermint gum and something sour underneath. Just so you know, sweetheart, we run our boarding manifest through TSA. If anything comes back flagged, anything at all, we will land this plane and have you removed in handcuffs, right there on the tarmac, in front of everyone. Just something to think about. Denise didn't move, didn't blink. Her fingers stayed on her tablet. Vanessa waited 3 full seconds for a reaction. When none came, she straightened up and adjusted her collar, like she was resetting herself for the next round. 15 minutes after that. Again, same lean, same whisper, but this time louder. Loud enough for 3C and 3D to hear. You sure you don't want to move to economy? You'd be so much more comfortable back there, with your people. I can have someone swap your seat. No one would judge you. Honestly, it would be easier for everyone. The word everyone hung in the air like smoke. Denise felt the older woman in 3C shift uncomfortably in her seat. She felt the Patagonia man in 3D go very still behind his newspaper. Nobody said anything. Nobody ever said anything. That was the whole point. And again, the 4th visit. Vanessa didn't even lean down this time. She stood over 3A with her arms crossed, looking down at Denise the way a store manager looks at a teenager they suspect of shoplifting. Some of these seats are reserved for our platinum clients, people who have been flying with us for years, people who spend real money. We'd hate for the wrong impression to be made. She paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, the way people add poison to a sentence they want to pretend is polite. I'm sure you understand. 4 visits. 4 threats. Each one a little louder. Each one a little more public. Each one designed to make Denise feel smaller, less certain, less real. Like a thumb pressing slowly into wet clay, trying to leave a mark that couldn't be washed out. Each time, Denise said nothing. Each time, her fingers moved across her tablet screen. Calm, steady, methodical. But she wasn't reading the contract anymore. She was writing. Timestamps, exact quotes, crew names from the manifest posted by the cockpit door, seat numbers of passengers who were present, Vanessa's full name and employee ID, which she had read from the badge pinned to her vest during the second visit. Everything recorded with the precision of someone who had done this before. Because she had. Not this exactly, but something like this, many times. She forwarded the document to 2 addresses: Eleanor Whitfield, General Counsel, Meridian Hospitality Group, and the office of the board secretary. At the bottom of the document, one line: Initiate Section 14.2 review. Then she opened her messages, typed quickly to Elijah. Mom's flight is bumpy, baby. Make sure you eat breakfast. Midterms tomorrow. I'm proud of you. 3 dots. Then Elijah's reply. Love you, Mom. Be safe. Don't kill anybody up there. Followed by a single emoji, the one with the nervous smile. Denise laughed, softly, just a breath through her nose. It was the first time she had smiled in an hour. In seat 2C, Helen Caldwell had not stopped writing since the beverage service began. Her notepad was now on its 4th page. The header on page 1, printed in small, precise letters. F.A.A. Office of Civil Rights. Field Observation Log. Each entry was time-stamped. Each quote was exact. She didn't editorialize. She didn't react. She wrote the way a surgeon cuts. Clean, steady, without emotion. She had been doing this for 22 years. She knew that evidence documented in the moment, on scene, in real time, was worth more than 1,000 complaints filed after the fact. She had watched Vanessa skip 3A during service. She had heard every word of the charity case speech. She had counted the 4 separate visits to intimidate the passenger. She had noted the ID confiscation, the TSA threat, the suggestion to move to economy. Page 4 was almost full. Helen turned to page 5 without looking up. In the rear galley, Maggie Wilson picked up the satellite phone. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but rock steady. This is Senior Purser Wilson, Flight 1208 Atlanta to Seattle. I'm logging a Class A incident under SOP 14.2. I need ground HR notified before we land. Wheels down in approximately 3 hours and 20 minutes. The voice on the other end asked what happened. Maggie closed her eyes. Passenger discrimination. Ongoing. I have 8 entries in the crew incident log, and the galley voice recorder has been running for 52 minutes. Back in the cabin, Vanessa was making her way toward 3A again. This time, she was carrying a coffee pot. She passed the row, tilted the pot slightly, and a stream of hot coffee splashed across the edge of Denise's tray and onto her blazer sleeve. The heat bit through the fabric instantly. Oh, so sorry about that. These things happen when people sit where they shouldn't. 2 passengers behind them gasped. The older woman in 3C pressed her call button immediately. When Maggie arrived, the woman said quietly but firmly, I want to file a complaint about that blonde attendant. I don't want her serving anyone in this cabin again. Maggie wrote it down. First passenger complaint. Documented. Denise didn't look at the coffee stain. She looked at Vanessa. Slowly. Directly. For the first time in the entire flight, she held the attendant's gaze without blinking. What's your name? Vanessa grinned. Wide. Triumphant. The grin of someone who had never once in her life faced a consequence for the things that came out of her mouth. Vanessa. Vanessa Brooks. Why? You gonna report me, sweetie? She tossed a business card onto Denise's wet tray. Good luck with that. She walked away laughing. The sound bounced off the cabin walls and settled into the silence like something rotting. Denise wiped the coffee from her sleeve with a napkin. She folded it neatly and placed it on the tray. Then she picked up her phone. One contact, Daniel Anderson, COO, Meridian Hospitality Group. She typed 4 words, pull the North Star file. Then she closed her eyes and waited. The plane hummed. The cabin slept. The clouds below turned slowly from gold to white. Something was coming, and nobody on that plane, except the woman in 3A, knew what it was. Denise wiped the coffee from her sleeve. She folded the napkin neatly and placed it on the tray. Then she picked up her phone, unbuckled her seatbelt, and walked to the lavatory area. She closed the door. Fluorescent light turned her skin blue-gray. There were lines under her eyes that hadn't been there this morning. She looked at the coffee stain on her sleeve. She looked at her own face. Then she dialed one number. Daniel Anderson picked up on the first ring. Denise, what's 7 words? Cancel the airline contract. Effective immediately. Denise, wait, North Star? The 44 million? The renewal is tomorrow morning. Pull it. All of it. Catering, ground logistics, fuel side vendor management, every truck, every meal, every napkin. Call Eleanor Whitfield. Press release to Reuters before we land. Denise, what happened? She looked at the mirror one more time. The face that had been spat at, looked through, and laughed at for 4 hours. I happened, Daniel. Just me. Sitting in a seat I paid for. She hung up. Within 15 minutes, Reuters carried the wire. 8 sentences, no adjectives. Meridian Hospitality Group terminates $44 million contract with North Star Atlantic Airways, effective immediately, due to documented violations of shared values regarding passenger dignity. In Seattle, Gregory Hollister, CEO of North Star Atlantic, woke to 11 missed calls and 38 emails. He read the Reuters statement twice. Then, he said a word that would have gotten him fined by the FCC. Find out which flight she's on. Now. In the cockpit, Captain Howard Bennett received the call from operations. His face went from confused to white in 90 seconds. He pressed the intercom. Maggie, cockpit, now. Maggie stepped through the door. Bennett didn't turn around. The woman in 3A is the CEO of Meridian Hospitality. $44 million a year. She just canceled the contract from her seat. What happened on this flight? Exactly what I reported 40 minutes ago, Captain. Exactly what's on the crew incident log. Exactly what the recorder has been capturing for the last hour. Bennett pressed his forehead against the cockpit wall. Then he flew the plane. 20 minutes from Seattle, his voice came over the PA. Ladies and gentlemen, Flight 1208 will not continue service beyond Seattle. All connecting flights have been canceled. The cabin stirred. Phones came out. The Patagonia man in 3D muttered about his Portland connection. Vanessa stood in the forward galley, frowning. What the hell is going on? Nobody answered. The wheels hit Seattle-Tacoma at 12:14 p.m. Before the seatbelt sign turned off, the forward door opened from outside. 2 men in dark suits boarded. They didn't stop. They didn't ask. They walked straight to row 3. Ms. Grant, Mr. Hollister sends his personal apologies. Your private charter is waiting on the South Tarmac. Vanessa's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Just air. Wait, who is... The suit didn't look at her. Ma'am, remain in the galley. Someone will be with you shortly. Then the second wave. Helen Caldwell rose from 2C. She reached into her blazer, removed a leather ID case, and held it at chest height. The overhead light caught the gold lettering. Federal Aviation Administration, Office of Civil Rights, Senior Investigator. She walked to the cockpit door where Bennett stood frozen. Captain, I'm Helen Caldwell, FAA Civil Rights. I was a passenger on this flight. I'm filing a federal observation report. Please retain all crew until ground HR arrives. She held up her notepad, 5 pages full. 4 incidents of targeted discrimination, verbal abuse, service denial, identity confiscation, deliberate physical contact, all time-stamped. Bennett nodded. He couldn't speak. Then the rear galley curtain parted. Maggie Wilson walked forward. In one hand, a sealed evidence bag. In the other, a 12-page crew incident log. She stopped directly in front of Vanessa. Vanessa, as senior purser, I am formally reporting you under SOP 14.2 for Class A passenger discrimination. Ground HR has been notified. You are not to leave this aircraft. Maggie, you can't. We've worked together for... I should have done this 6 years ago. I'm doing it now. Silence swallowed the cabin whole. Vanessa looked around. Slowly. One face at a time. The woman in 3A, CEO. $44 million. Cancelled. The woman in 2C. Federal investigator. 5 pages. The senior purser. 12 pages. 52 minutes of audio. The woman in 3C. Formal complaint on record. Every direction she turned, a door had already closed. Denise stood. She straightened her blazer, the one with the coffee stains still dark on the sleeve. She picked up her tote bag, the tattered one, the one Vanessa had mocked 4 hours ago. She turned to Vanessa, didn't shout, didn't smile, just stillness. You didn't just refuse me champagne. You told a cabin full of people that someone who looks like me doesn't deserve to sit here. You said it loud. You said it proud. Ms. Grant, please. I didn't know. That's the problem, Vanessa. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle, which made it land so much harder. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me like a human being. She walked off the plane. The cabin stayed silent long after she was gone. The plastic cup was still on the tray of seat 3A, exactly where Vanessa had placed it, still full. Vanessa Brooks didn't make it to the terminal. 2 HR officers and a union representative were waiting at the end of the jet bridge. They stood in a line, like a wall she was always going to walk into. One of them held a clipboard. The other held a plastic bag for her personal belongings. The union rep held nothing. He just looked at the floor. Miss Brooks, please come with us. They took her phone. They deactivated her ID badge right there in the corridor. A small beep, a red light, and 12 years of seniority disappeared in the time it takes to blink. They walked her through the back hallways of SeaTac, past the baggage handlers and the cleaning crews and the vending machines that nobody ever used. She walked the same route she had walked 1,000 times as crew. This time, she walked it as cargo. Captain Howard Bennett stood at the cockpit door and watched her go. He had flown for North Star Atlantic for 22 years. He said nothing. In a small windowless office behind gate C14, Vanessa sat across from Catherine Holloway, North Star Atlantic's regional HR director. Catherine was 50 years old, black, calm in the way that women who have spent their entire careers navigating rooms full of Vanessas learn to be calm. She had a file in front of her. It was already thick. Catherine placed 3 documents on the table, one at a time, slowly, the way a dealer lays cards. First, Maggie Wilson's crew incident log, 12 pages, handwritten, signed by the senior purser of Flight 1208. Second, the galley voice recorder transcript, 52 minutes of audio, transcribed and timestamped by the crew resource manager on the ground. Third, Helen Caldwell's FAA Field Observation Report, 5 pages, official federal letterhead, stamped. Vanessa stared at the documents. Then the excuses began. They came in order, like stations on a train she had ridden many times before. I was just doing my job. Catherine said nothing. She didn't look the part. Anyone would have made the same call. Catherine said nothing. This is being completely blown out of proportion. Catherine said nothing. I'm not racist. I have a black coworker, Tanya in gate services. Ask her. She'll tell you I'm not. Catherine raised one hand. Vanessa stopped. Vanessa, you were not reported by the passenger in 3A. You were reported by your own senior purser, a white woman with 28 years of service who activated the galley recorder and filed a 12-page incident log. You were documented by a federal aviation investigator who happened to be sitting in 2C, a white woman with 22 years at the FAA. And you were formally complained about by a 70-year-old white woman in 3C who pressed her call button and asked that you never serve her cabin again. She let that land. This is not about the passenger's race, Vanessa. This is about your conduct, documented by your own colleagues, recorded by your own airline's equipment, observed by your own government. Vanessa's face crumbled. The performance mask, the one she had worn for 12 years, the one that smiled at first-class passengers and sneered at everyone else, finally fell off. What was underneath was smaller than anyone expected. Please, I have a mortgage. I have a son. He's in middle school. Please. Catherine closed the file. Vanessa, there is no version of this story where you keep your job. Within 4 hours, Vanessa Brooks was officially terminated for cause. Her FAA-issued cabin crew credentials were flagged. She would not work in commercial aviation again. That same afternoon, North Star Atlantic issued a public statement. CEO Gregory Hollister stood behind a podium at SeaTac, flanked by 2 lawyers and a communications director who looked like she hadn't slept. He apologized. He used Denise Grant's name. He used the word unacceptable 4 times in 3 minutes. Then he did something nobody expected. He boarded a commercial flight, not the company jet deliberately, to Atlanta. He requested, in writing, a private meeting with Denise Grant. Eleanor Whitfield, Meridian's general counsel, read the request and shook her head. He doesn't deserve a meeting, Denise. Let the lawyers handle it. Denise was standing at her office window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. The same skyline her mother had never seen from this height. She thought about Ruth. She thought about the food truck. She thought about a woman who had spent her whole life being polite to people who didn't deserve it, and how that politeness had never once been weakness. Send him in, Eleanor. I have something to say to his face. Gregory Hollister arrived at Meridian's Atlanta headquarters at 9 the next morning. He wore a navy suit, no tie. He hadn't slept. You could see it in the skin under his eyes, thin and gray like wet paper. Eleanor Whitfield met him in the lobby. She didn't shake his hand. She walked him to the elevator in silence. 32nd floor, corner office. The door was already open. Denise was sitting behind her desk. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows. The Atlanta skyline stretched out in every direction, gold and glass in the morning light. On the corner of her desk, the same photograph of Ruth Grant standing in front of her food truck. Hollister didn't notice it. He wouldn't have understood it if he had. He sat down. He apologized. Profusely. He offered to increase the contract by 20%. He offered a seat on the North Star Atlantic Board of Directors. He offered a public joint statement written by Denise, approved by his legal team, without edits. He offered anything and everything a man offers when he realizes the ground beneath him is already gone. Denise listened. She didn't interrupt. She let him finish the way you let someone finish digging before you show them what they've dug. Then she leaned forward. Gregory, I don't want a bigger contract. I don't want a board seat. I don't want your press release. She paused. Let the silence do its work. Vanessa Brooks didn't wake up yesterday and decide to humiliate me. She did it because somewhere, in your training, in your culture, in your hiring, in your management, somebody taught her she could. And nobody ever stopped her. For 12 years. She let that land. You don't have a Vanessa problem. You have a North Star problem. Hollister opened his mouth, closed it. He looked like a man watching his own house burn from the inside. Denise slid a document across the desk, 12 pages, bound. The cover page read, Conditions for Contract Reinstatement, Meridian Hospitality Group. This is the only way our companies do business again. 12 mandatory reforms. Independent diversity audits conducted quarterly by a third-party firm chosen by Meridian. Comprehensive bias training for every crew member, gate agent, and ground staff employee. Not a webinar, not a PowerPoint, a 3-day immersive program. termination protocols for any documented act of discrimination, with zero tolerance and no internal appeals process. A passenger advocacy hotline staffed around the clock, with reports submitted directly to Meridian's compliance office, and quarterly compliance reports, reviewed not by North Star's own board, but by Denise Grant's team. Hollister read every page. His hand trembled on page 4. By page 8, he had stopped trying to negotiate. By page 12, he just signed. Every page, every line. He didn't say a word when he left. Eleanor Whitfield escorted him back to the elevator. The doors closed. He was gone. Denise sat alone in her office for a long time after that. She picked up Ruth's photograph and held it in both hands. "We got him, Mama." She said it quietly, to no one, to everyone. What followed over the next 6 months unfolded like dominoes falling in slow motion. The Federal Aviation Administration opened a formal civil rights investigation into North Star Atlantic, the first in 6 years. The Department of Transportation joined, then the EEOC. Helen Caldwell's field observation report became the foundation document, 5 pages that cracked open an institution. 12 former passengers came forward, almost all black or brown, each with a story about Vanessa Brooks. Some went back 8 years. A woman from Detroit who had been told to go back to Coach where she belonged on a flight to Miami. A businessman from Chicago who had been asked 3 times to show his boarding pass, while the white passenger beside him was never asked once. A college student flying home for her grandmother's funeral who had been moved from her assigned seat because a white passenger felt uncomfortable. 6 internal complaints had been filed about Vanessa over those 8 years. Every single one had been buried by a regional manager named Bradley Sutton. He had marked them resolved, no action required, and filed them in a drawer that no one ever opened. Sutton was terminated, then sued. CNN ran a primetime special. Patricia Sullivan opened with the line, "Tonight, what happens when the wrong woman gets told she doesn't belong?" The segment ran 42 minutes. It was the network's highest-rated non-election broadcast of the year. Denise was invited on every major show. She declined them all except one, a long-form interview with a black woman journalist on PBS. She wore the navy blazer, the one with the coffee stain. She had never cleaned it. I keep it as a reminder, not of what she did, of what I didn't do. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't give her the satisfaction of becoming the person she already decided I was. Eleanor Whitfield filed a class action civil rights lawsuit on behalf of the 12 passengers. The settlement? $12.5 million. Denise took $0. Every cent went into a fund she created, the 3A Fund, legal aid for black travelers facing in-flight discrimination, travel scholarships for black students in hospitality and aviation programs at HBCUs across the country. Vanessa Brooks was sued personally for emotional distress. She lost. She filed for bankruptcy. She started a GoFundMe titled, "I was canceled for doing my job." It was removed in 18 hours for violating community guidelines. 2 years later, a small newspaper in eastern Washington found her working the night shift at a budget motel outside Spokane. She declined to comment. North Star Atlantic stock dropped 22% in 2 weeks. 3 board members resigned. Gregory Hollister stayed. He personally implemented every one of Denise's 12 reforms. He attended every quarterly compliance review himself. He brought his daughters to one of them. He never sought good press for any of it. 2 other major airlines, watching the fallout, voluntarily adopted the Grant Protocol as their own standard. The FAA announced new federal guidelines for in-flight discrimination response, drafted with input from Meridian's legal team and Helen Caldwell's task force. Denise was invited to testify before a Senate subcommittee on civil rights in commercial transportation. She wore the navy blazer. She spoke for 9 minutes. She did not mention Vanessa Brooks once. Her closing line? "You can't legislate respect into existence, But you can make it expensive to refuse it. So let's make it expensive. 18 months after Flight 1208, a different airline, a different city, a window seat, 3A. Denise Grant always picked 3A now. Every flight, every airline. She never explained why. She didn't have to. The people who knew the story understood. The people who didn't would learn eventually. The cabin was quiet. Early morning light came through the oval window and fell across her hands, folded in her lap the same way they had been folded that day. She wore the navy blazer. Still no jewelry. Still no makeup. Still the same tattered tote bag, stitching still loose at the corners. She had been offered new bags. Designers had sent them. She kept the old one. A young flight attendant approached from the forward galley. Black, maybe 23. Her uniform was new. You could tell by the way the creases were still sharp and the name tag was still slightly crooked. Her hands were shaking, just barely, the way hands shake on a first week. Champagne, ma'am? Denise looked up. She smiled. Yes, please. Thank you, sweetheart. The attendant poured. Her hands steadied. A perfect pour. Golden bubbles rising in a crystal flute. She set it on a napkin and placed it gently on the tray. Then she leaned down, close, almost a whisper. Ms. Grant? I'm sorry. I need to say this. I'm only here because of the scholarship. The 3A fund paid for my last 2 years at Howard University. Aviation management. I graduated in May. This is my second week. Her eyes were shining. I wrote your name in my graduation speech. My mama cried for 20 minutes. Denise reached out and took the young woman's hand, held it gently, the way Ruth used to hold hers when she was small and the world felt too big and too sharp. What's your name? Jasmine. Jasmine Taylor. Jasmine. You're not here because of me. You're here because you earned it. I just made it a little harder for them to keep you out. Jasmine nodded. She couldn't speak. She squeezed Denise's hand once, then straightened her uniform and walked back to the galley with her chin up and her shoulders square. She had passengers to serve. Denise watched her go. She picked up the champagne flute and held it up to the window. The morning light passed through the golden liquid and threw small circles of light across the ceiling of the cabin. She took one sip, set it down. It tasted like victory, and grief, and time, and every glass she had ever been told she didn't deserve. In Atlanta, that same morning, Maggie Wilson stood at a podium in a lecture hall at Spelman College. 200 students in front of her, almost all black, almost all women, many of them 3A fund scholars. The course was one she had helped design, Bystander to Upstander, Ethics in Service Industries. She opened the first lecture the way she would open every lecture for the rest of her career. My name is Maggie Wilson. I worked 28 years for an airline that taught me to look away. Then one morning, on Flight 1208, I met a woman in seat 3A who didn't even know she was teaching me how to look back. In the last row of the lecture hall, unnoticed, Denise Grant's son Elijah sat with his laptop open. He was recording the lecture for his mother. He typed a quick message. Mom, she's incredible. Grandma would be so proud. Denise read it 30,000 feet above the earth. One tear. Just one. The only one she had allowed herself in 18 months. She wiped it before anyone could see. Dignity isn't something you're given because of your title. It's something you're owed because you exist. The people who can't tell the difference between a CEO in a sweatshirt and a charity case in 3A, they're the ones who show you exactly who they are. Long before anyone has to make a phone call. So tell me, have you ever been the woman in 3A? Or have you ever been sitting nearby, watching, deciding whether to speak up or stay silent? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if Denise's story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe. Because in this country, it shouldn't take a $44 million contract to be treated like a human being. And until it doesn't, we keep telling these stories. For everyone who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere they paid to be, this seat is yours.